Earlier in the year, NZXT announced a whole range of new cases that had the same name, but were completely different cases from the previous versions. This is the NZXT H5 Flow. It's only an H5 by name. It shares almost nothing in common with the original H5 Flow. Let's take a bit of a closer look, and I wanted to let you guys know what the deal is with this case, because this one has been sitting here for a few months and I forgot that we had it. Let's take a look.
This video is brought to you by Gigabyte and Aorus and their new lineup of X870 and Z890 motherboards that support both the Intel Core 2 Ultra series processors and the new AMD Ryzen 9000 series processors. Both chipsets offer robust and efficient power delivery and cooling across the various models, especially with the new King, the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D. All boards across the range feature auto overclocking with AI-powered software for ease of use to help you squeeze every last megahertz of performance from your unlocked CPU. Speaking of AI, Gigabyte also has a new range of X870 and Z890 AI Top series boards that allow you to train your own AI models via their new AI Top utility. All of these X870 and Z890 boards feature options like Wi-Fi 7, 10 gigabit Ethernet, Thunderbolt 4, and plenty of USB ports with toolless M.2 slots. The whole range of new Gigabyte and Aorus X870 and Z890 motherboards are available from your favourite online retailers right now. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand, Aorus will throw in a 1TB Gen 4 SSD with eligible motherboard models. For more info, check out the links in the video description.
Let's start off with panel removal. There's a little lip on the edge of the TG side panel. What you want to do is get your thumb underneath there and then pull that, and then that will unclip the TG side panel, and then you can lift that away from the case. Next, we're going to remove the rear. There's two captive thumb screws on the back. Just loosen those, and then you can slide that panel and then lift that away from the case. And then we can remove the top panel, which has another captive thumb screw. Loosen that screw, and then you can pull it back and then lift it up and then away from the case. Finally, the front panel. You can put your thumb on the edge of that front panel, give it a bit of a pop, and then you can pull that and lift it away from the case. In terms of power supply support, the H5 Flow 2024 supports power supplies up to 200 millimeters in length. And here's a little bit of an example of with a power supply in the case. Obviously, there's no cables installed. Also, keep in mind that because this case has a solid bottom panel, you will need to flip the power supply over and intake from the other side. So in this example with the power supply in the case, this is in the upside down and wrong orientation. Don't say I didn't tell you. As for storage, there's a removable drive cage on the bottom of the case with a captive thumb screw. You can loosen that and pop that cage away from the case. This will allow you to install two 2.5-inch drives or a single 3.5-inch hard disk. On the RGB version of the case, there's this 360mm fan frame that is mounted in the front of the case. On the non-RGB version, this is not pre-installed. As for the rear of the case, there's a single 120mm fan up the back there. Now, keep in mind, the fan frame and the single 120mm fan are not PWM fans. They're 3-pin fans. And the RGB connectors for the front fan frame have a 3-pin 5V addressable RGB connector or an NZXT RGB connector. As for cable management, there's plenty of cable raceways, as well as pre-installed Velcro tie downs. There's a massive cutout for the cables that would come from your cooler or your EPS power cables, so there's plenty of room for that stuff. There's also another cable raceway for your EPS power cables to run down. It has pre-installed Velcro there as well, and a nice little lip to hold all the cables down. There's actually plenty of lips on the back for cable management, and in classic NZXT fashion, there is the NZXT cable management bar. As for fans and radiators, at the top, you can do up to a 280mm liquid cooler if you're using low profile RAM, but typically I would recommend a 240mm liquid cooler and two 120mm fans or two 140mm fans. At the front, quite obviously, you can do three 120mm fans because of that pre-installed fan frame, two 140mm fans, or up to a 360mm radiator. On the rear, you can do a single 120mm fan. Finally, at the bottom of the case, you can do two 120mm fans on the PSU shroud. If you pay close attention to the PSU shroud, you'll notice that the whole PSU shroud is mesh. This is what makes this case completely different to the previous generation H5s. For motherboard support, it supports ITX up to eATX, and you can remove the cable management bar to increase that motherboard support. In this example, we've just got an ATX board. For air cooler support, up to 170mm in total. As for GPU support, you can install GPUs up to 410mm in length. You can also do vertical GPU mounting. Because all of the PCIe cutouts are removable, keep in mind, for the build, I had to modify the case slightly. So that's on NZXT for that one. It is a little bit weird that there is some other supports, but I'll come back to that later on in the video. For wiring, we've got a USB-C cable, there's a USB Type-A cable, there's a combined front panel cable with all the connectors for everything on your case, and a front panel audio connector. There's a power button with a combined power light, there's a USB Type-A port, a USB Type-C port, and a combined headphone and microphone jack. I think that's everything you need to know about this brand new NZXT H5 2024. Let's do our usual thing, let's do a build and we'll test the thermals, and I'll let you know what the deal is with this case. Let's take a little bit of a look at the thermals here. What you're seeing on your screen right now is something a little bit strange. First of all, GPU thermals are fine. The reason why I didn't put fans underneath the GPU is because I didn't have fans I wanted to put under there, and I didn't think that it needed fans because of the design of the case, which we'll come back to in a moment. But CPU thermals are strange. The 9800X3D does not perform the same way as the 7800X3D did. It is quite different in architecture, so the thermals are typically high for the CPU, but very easy to manage. They kind of hit this thermal roof, and then it doesn't really move. So also remember, when we run these thermal tests, this is worst case scenario, and typically you're not going to be using it at 100 billion% all of the time. So yeah. Anyways, guys, if you're interested in any of the hardware used in this build, there's a PCPartPicker list down below, and there's also little cards during the build section of the video so you can see what it all is. But what do I think of the H5 Flow 2024 from NZXT? Well, this is a strange case. First of all, this is not an H5 Flow. This is a completely new case. I said this with the H7 2024. Why didn't they just come up with a new name? It just doesn't make sense to me because, like I said, it shares no similarities with the H5 other than it's a computer case with a glass side panel. It's got way better fan compatibility. It still has that classic NZXT cable management bar that we've seen a billion times, but the basement section is different. And what that means is it's got this mesh side panel that works as a massive intake for the bottom of the case for your GPU and your power supply. However, everything from here on is not really a deal breaker. It is just something to think about when you're building with this because it is slightly different to what you're used to seeing. First of all, the power supply goes in upside down. There's no intake on the bottom of the case for the power supply. It's just a straight up solid panel. So your power supply needs to draw air from the other side. So it's upside down. There's no dust filters on the case at all. Like I'm talking 0 dust filters, so there's no dust filtration. But realistically, the design of the mesh here will catch a lot of the dust. And I have seen this with the Fractal North mesh that I've got here in the studio. I know people will get really mad about no dust filters, but there is a few limitations with dust filters. One of them being that if you have a dust filter on the top panel here, you're going to restrict airflow, especially if you're using it for exhaust. It can be a bit of a problem and actually kind of unnecessary if the dust filtration on the rest of the case for intake is fine, whereas this has none, but I think you would get away with it. Vertical GPU support here is a little bit strange as well. You can see that I did a vertical GPU bracket in here, but after modifying the case, this case does have fully removable brackets for all of the PCIe slot covers, but there's an edge between each of the slots where there is a bit of metal that I had to use a nibbler to cut out to make this Montech bracket fit. This is the only one that I've got to really test with. So it's not a common vertical GPU bracket, but it is, again, something to keep in mind. Also, with the parts in this build, I know I'm kind of rambling a bit because there's a lot to talk about. This is the new NZXT Kraken Elite V2. It is absolutely freaking massive, and I didn't realize when I planned this out in my head that the GPU would cover a bit of the cooler, so that's why that's the choice. Also, again, no bottom fans in this build because I didn't really want to, and I didn't have nice fans to suit the aesthetic of the build, so I didn't do it, and I don't think it would have impacted the thermals too much anyway. But as far as the rest of the case with the design and construction, this is classic NZXT, really high quality materials, really well built. They've done a better job here with the tempered glass side panel that we've seen on any of their, let's call them 5 series cases. This is easily one of the best side panels. I've got a habit of smashing NZXT side panels, so I didn't do it this time. The NZXT H5 2024 does a few things really well, and it does things that a case should do. First of all, compatibility with hardware is excellent here. It also supports eATX motherboards, so a case in this size, good. For an ATX or /eATX case, this is really small. You have to take into account when I'm standing here, this table's really elevated and I'm standing quite far back from the case, so it makes it look bigger than it is. That's for dramatic purposes only, but the case is not huge, and I had 0 issues other than that GPU bracket building in this case. The cable management is fantastic. Check out this clip here. I didn't manage any cables. Everything just had a place and it went where it was supposed to go. All of the cable management paths and raceways here are awesome. This is kind of what NZXT has been good at all of this time, but this is just done in a way that you don't have to think about it. If you're interested in the NZXT H5 Flow, there's a couple different versions of it. So the version without the RGB fans and whatnot is going for around $95 US, around about 125 Aussie dollars. Or if you want the RGB version with their new fan frame, you're looking at about 125 US, or around about 189 Aussie dollars. Overall, for the build quality and just NZXT pricing, it's not terrible value because, like I mentioned, this is one of their best cases yet. They really did think of everything and they did it in such a nice and easy to build way. My only issue again is that it's called the H5 Flow 2024. ultimately, again, I'll say it, this is one of NZXT's best cases that you might not even know exists, because NZXT could have spent a little bit more time and not just called it the H5 Flow 2024 and just come up with something fresh. I would have appreciated that more, because it's just confusing for you guys at the end of the day. What about when it's 2025? Are they going to release a 2025 version? It's just very confusing. Just give it a whole new name so the year doesn't matter, right? Or maybe 2024 is the model number. Something to ponder. Anyway, let me know what you think. I really, really like this case. I had no expectations going into it. We saw this behind closed doors at Computex. I'm not even sure if they displayed this at the NZXT booth, but we did see this behind closed doors, and I liked it then, and I really like it now. It's just a shame that I forgot that I had it.